Hello and welcome back to the No Dig Norfolk Gardener. Now, about a week or so ago, we had a video out explaining how you can garden on a budget. So if you're new to gardening and you don't quite have the finances to buy things like this and this, which is where myself and Mrs. W found ourselves a few years back, there are lots of things around the household that you can utilise to grow things in. And in today's programme, we're going to show you what happened. Here is where they all were, and I just wanted to show you that using these trays and making good use of them, it's worked very well. I've come through and it's been a good success. Now, I can tell Mrs. W has been in here during the week, either Friday or Saturday, because some of these have been potted on for us, and we have lots of family and friends and that also like to grow their own veg. They don't have as much space as us, but they don't need as much as us. But we always grow them something and grow little extras. And you can see there's a little Savoy King that Mrs. W has planted on, and that'll be winging its way to somebody who wants it. Also, any that we have left over, we tend to put down to the front of our garden at the gate, and if people want, to take those away with them, happy days. And it's not that we look to make a fortune out of anything like that. That's not really the idea of it. But somebody's just come along and thought, I've always wanted to grow my own, but I've got no greenhouse, I've got no this, I've got no that. If we just encourage them just to pick a couple of those plants up and grow them, there's 2 more people to join the homegrown veg revolution. So we have these plants here. This is Savoy King, which is a cabbage. I really quite like that. And what I want to do is, I don't just want to say something to you guys and then not follow through, essentially. So this is an old coffee cup. We said about that in the last video, about how you can utilise those. So all I'm going to do is to just snip some holes in the bottom. Because drainage is important for these plants. They don't like to sit in a pool of water. They don't need a lot. And I'm just going to fill this with some compost. And it's really important that when you're growing brassicas, to get good success with brassicas, they like to be in firm ground. It's one of the reasons why our plot grows brassicas really quite well, because our soil is heavy clay, so it's always really quite firm. And obviously with the addition of the compost we put on top, being no dig, that means that the fertility is really quite nice and high too. But when you're potting these on, it's also quite important that that compost is relatively firm. And I'm going to take my trusty old Sharpie and just make a hole in there. I shall gently ease one of these plants out. And there you can see it. It's got a nice root on it. And I'm sure I've said this before, but if you are new to gardening, you know, always hold your seedlings by the leaf. If this was to suddenly now fall now and the leaf broke, it would grow another leaf. But if you break the stem, that's the end for it. Then all as we do is drop that down into its hole. And because this has got a little on the leggy side for my liking, I'm going to bury it nice and deep. It's not going to hurt the plant. And bear in mind that plant is only 1 week old. Now over the next 2 to 3 weeks it's going to get a bit taller and it's going to grow its first true set of leaves. Indeed, I can even see already that there's something happening between those two seedling leaves. It's not big enough for you to pick up on camera, but I can see this starting to happen, and I wouldn't mind wagering that in a week's time, when if we were to film this again, you would see its first true leaf actually starting to grow there. It would catch it on camera. That tells me that we're on target now to plant this out into our bed in about 3 weeks' time. And as we said last week, hitting our goal of where we try to sow something and 4 to 5 weeks later it's planted out into the ground. So also I've potted on these ones. This is actually marathon, this is not a cabbage, this is marathon, which is a Calabrese, and I've put those into these toilet rolls to demonstrate how that would work. I think actually you can see probably a little bit better there, hopefully the camera's picking it up, that new leaf starting to come there. It's only very tiny at the moment, but believe you me, a week or so and it'll be a definite leaf. So we'll just water these in. And of course the very act of watering the toilet rolls in particular means that when you come to plant them out into the ground eventually, the rotting down process of the cardboard is already beginning. It's the following week now, and I thought I'd just show you, because I did say that within a week we would have, or we would see, the first true leaves. And indeed, there they are starting to come. And even the Calabrese that we pricked out into these toilet rolls, you can see their first leaf has appeared. Second one, I think, is on its way. So they're right on track to be going out into our no dig plots. Ooh, within about 2 weeks, around about mid-March, they will go out into the ground. One thing I did just want to say, I had a comment from one of our viewers shortly after that video went out, and they said, you can cut these toilet rolls in half, which will save you even more compost. What an amazing idea! All of a sudden you'll go from 6 plant pots to 12. Slightly less compost, because these don't need to be in compost this long. So well done you. And you can also see here with the old coffee cup that I did cut in half, you can see that also has grown its first leaf. So everything is looking really good, and yeah, what I would say is that you saw us prick these out only after a week of being in these trays. But you know, there is a window of opportunity here. They don't have to be done after a week. You know, if you were busy, you could do them a few days later. You know, these are 2-week-old seedlings now, and you can see that they're getting their first true leaf, and they could be pricked out now. It's just that myself and Mrs. W, we like to move things on quite quickly because they tend to take up less space in that way. And as you can see behind me, we have a limited space where things can go. Now, I had a question from somebody who was asking about how we germinated these at this time of the year. So if I didn't make it clear, these, they were sown into these trays, and these happen to be the they're the Savoy King, actually, the Savoy King cabbage. So they were sown into that tray, and then they went back down to our house. Now with brassicas, they don't particularly need any great heat. The heat that's within our kitchen, because these are on our kitchen windowsill, was enough to germinate those. And then, once they do get to this stage, which we can see here, we then prick them out. In the case of these, they went into the cardboard toilet rolls. Some obviously did go into our modules, and then they come up here to the greenhouse. Now this greenhouse is unheated. Yeah, so it is. It has no heating in it whatsoever, only the heat that the sun provides during the day. But of course we do still get, you know, quite cool nights. During the second half of February, and now we're into March, we don't see such extreme cold temperatures at night. So last night it was actually 0 degrees. We did see a slight frost on the roof, but actually the soil and grass was still green. You couldn't see any evidence of any frost there. And, you know, of course we could still get some frost. And if we suddenly forecast some quite harsh frosts, what we would do is take the most vulnerable plants and take them back down to our kitchen, and there they'll just stay until it's warm enough to bring them back up here. So when I say vulnerable plants, I don't think we've really got any here actually, because we've got brassicas, onions, all of those things at the moment. They're not so bad, you know, they can withstand it being frosty out there and icy. What you wouldn't want to do, however, was to leave your peppers here. Now I've brought these up today just to show you that they have germinated, and if you remember, this was our home saved seed from our peppers from last season. Now they did go on a heat mat to germinate. As soon as they had germinated, we then take them off the heat mat, and then the heat from the kitchen in our house is enough just to keep them going. And we'll let them get a bit bigger before we pot them on as yet. They don't need pricking out and potting on individually. It'll probably be another couple of weeks or so, I guess, before they get to that stage. But these aren't left up here at all. They stay in the kitchen because they are very vulnerable to cold frosts. So they won't actually probably come up into this greenhouse probably until April time, when we're likely not to get frosts. So that's an update. If you go back to the initial video, you'll see how we sowed all these things, and of course in this one we've gone through the next 2 weeks. So we're now some 2 weeks since we first sowed those seeds into those trays. So I hope you enjoyed this update, and we should be back the weekend. I do believe that we're about to extend that pea and bean tunnel, Mrs. W.
We are.
We shall see you next time.